Hello and welcome to the Cruising Altitude. If you are coming back from a previous video that you've seen of mine, welcome back. And if you are new, hi, welcome, nice to have you here. So first up is the company that I chose to move my larger furniture pieces over from California to Florida, and I ended up choosing U-Box or U-Haul with their U-Box service, mostly because of the cost, but also because of the flexibility. And to give you a quick overview, I got multiple quotes from local, you know, coast to coast movers and local movers, and tried every sort of angle to search for people that would take things from one end to the other, from the west coast to the east coast, and ultimately found that their prices were in and around the 7 to 8 thousand range. Some even peaked 10,000. But the amount of large pieces of furniture that I had just didn't warrant um, paying that amount of money. And so I had to go back to the drawing board a little bit. And the first thing I did was figure out, okay, if I were to spend $8,000 on sending over these sofas, is it really worth it? Like, what is the value of my furniture? And it was not worth that much at the time. So I decided not to go that route, and had decided originally to just sell it all and then I would repurchase once I arrived at my destination. Luckily, though, I did a little bit more research and, like I mentioned, found the U-Box service, which is, I guess, similar to Pods, just I felt it was a lot cheaper when I looked. So I went ahead with that, booked with U-Box, and ballpark figure I paid just under $3,000, or it was around the $3,000 mark. It could have been a little bit over after taxes, but very close to 3,000, and the service was incredibly good for the price. So I went online to the U-Haul website, decided that I wanted a U-Box, went through the booking process, which was very easy, very straightforward, and within that process it allowed me to select a third-party moving help company for whichever end I wanted help on. So I was able to select help to load the U-Box on the California end and also on the Florida end. And it gave quite a few options as well. So you could filter by cost, you could filter by ratings, things like that. I believe distance as well. So I was able to look through and kind of find like a happy medium, and everything worked out perfectly, including a small mishap that I made a decision on. But so to give you a quick thing on what happened there, I was on my drive over calling the service that I'd chosen to bring my stuff to me in Florida, and they were just not very. They were responsive, but they weren't immediate responses. Irresponsive, and every time I asked them for a time or whether they could confirm if the date works for them, I kept getting a yes, but let me get back to you. And for me, I wanted something like solid in stone, like, yes, they're going to turn up at 10 a.m. So I called U-Haul and said, can I change the company? Like, does it impede them? This is still quite a few days out. It was about a week out, I believe. So um, anyway, I called them up and said, look, this is what's going on, and no problem. They applied the credit to back to my account, and I was able to select another company that were much more responsive, and ultimately turned up, brought my furniture in, and yeah, really, really smooth. The other thing I would say about it is the communication that you get. For me at least, I found it was just enough. I get a little bit irritated if I get text messages every 2 seconds, but also wanted to be kept up to date with what was happening. And I think they did a really good job at telling you, all the required placements of your U-Box. So, for example, some of the communications I received, or actually all of them, I guess, was that one was that the U-Box was going to arrive that day. The next one was that it had been taken and arrived at the California U-Haul Center. The next one was that it was getting ready to leave. Then it told me where it was on its journey across the multiple states. And then there was another one when it arrived in Florida. And then once it hit Florida, I was called by the depot in Florida to let me know that it was there, and just to double check all the arrangements with the company. And then the company called me and ultimately picked it up and it was delivered. And then I got one saying that it was complete. And I thought it was really fantastic for the price. So if you're looking to move and looking for ideas, I definitely recommend it. One thing I will say, I didn't have too much furniture, so perhaps it doesn't work out from a financial point of view if you have a large home with lots of furniture, because in that case you would need more U boxes. So, do your own due diligence and take a look at it. But definitely for me it worked out, and I'll give you a rundown of the furniture pieces I had as well in there. I had a sofa, which is a 2.5 seater, I would say. We can stretch it to a 3 seater. I have a small 3 seater or a large 2 seater. I have a California King mattress with bed frame. That bed frame could be broken down, with the slats and everything that was in there. A 60-inch TV, a desk chair, dining table, which had a removable glass top, and I think the base was about 40 to 50 inches in diameter, and the glass on top was a 60-inch diameter. Chairs could be broken down, the legs could be taken off, so they were fairly small in size. And then I had an entryway table, again, quite lightweight, but still, a solid piece of wood. And then a cabinet which folds out into a desk, so quite heavy, not too large. I had some bedside tables in there. I had some of the C-shaped sofa tables in there. I had a Christmas tree, canvases, about 5 or 6 canvases I had in there, and there were a few other miscellaneous pieces that would like slot into the areas that we found, but ultimately those are the large pieces. So I don't think that's a lot of furniture, to be honest. And I think if you're going to make a move like this, just take a look. They often have U boxes in local U-Haul centres. So I did actually drive down there with my measuring tape and take measurements. I wanted to see it for myself, and then I created that space in my living room. So I used tape and just created like the base, and then on my wall I kind of left like a pencil mark as to how high I can go, and it gave me a really good idea of what I could fit in there, without having to find out last minute that it wasn't going to fit. So yeah, like I said, U-Box, fantastic service, and definitely something for you guys to check out if you are making a move like this. The next portion was the planning of the journey, and then the journey itself, and having to factor in how, gas stations, food, feeding my dog, allowing my dog to relieve himself, and making sure that that was easy. I didn't want anything to be cumbersome on this trip, so as I was checking out, the maps and placing my little Street View cursor down and double checking everything to see what the roads looked like and if they were barren land or whether they were going through city centres, things like that, or town centres, perhaps not city centres, but I did that a lot. And then as I was researching, somebody mentioned in another video about this similar topic, there's an app called iExit, and that was a incredible find, and I'm very grateful to that person who dropped that suggestion, because that was really helpful. So it basically, as you're driving along the roads and freeways and things like that, it'll tell you the upcoming service stops, and that could be anything from one of the more, I don't know what they're called, they're like park stops. The only thing there is grass and restrooms. There's nothing else in there. Sometimes there's some historical information, but very little else. Sometimes, most of the time, there's no gas station there. So it would show things like that, but it would also show gas stations. It would show service stations that have food and gas stations. Sometimes they would have accommodation, hotels, things like that. And I just found it really helpful to decide when I was going to pull off. So, for example, if I felt a little bit hungry, but I could see that I would need to top up with gas, I would try to align it well so that I would stop at one with good food choices and that I would top up my gas at a good point. So, not too early, not too late. And I just found it really easy. And it's so big that I had it on my little phone holder on the side, and you can easily just like glance at it, see what's coming up, and then make a decision from there. So yeah, iExit is the name of that app, and it was a fantastic add-on or help guide, whatever you want to call it, to this trip. The other thing was ensuring that the hotels, of course, were pet friendly and the surrounding areas. So, for example, there were a few that I looked like at that were fantastic in reviews and they were dog friendly. However, there wasn't really anywhere for my dog to relieve himself. And given the long journey, I wanted to pick somewhere where we could go for a little walk or like just a little bit more than a concrete block. Perhaps, like in some cases, a patch of grass. But we didn't have too much trouble doing that. It wasn't, I couldn't make it a priority just because of the journey type, and you've only got so many hotels available to you in certain areas. But for the most part, we were successful in finding hotels with that. So, quick rundown. I'm going to jump back and forth here to like finalize the bit I'm talking about. So I'm kind of like jumping to the end of my journey and then back into the middle portions to give more context. But so, talking about hotels, I went to the Hotel McCoy in Arizona to start with, and that was fantastic. They had late check-in, they offered free drinks in the bar, they had lots of like gimmicky, not gimmicky, but just very, very nice like features that you could add on. I didn't make use of them just because I had the dog with me and didn't want to take him into a food establishment, so we didn't end up using them, but nonetheless, they did offer them. That was really nice. And the hotel room I booked was one with a kitchenette. So it had a little kettle, it had a little stove top, it had a sink and a fridge and a freezer, which I'll come back to a little bit later. But really easy. I could park my car right outside the front door, much like a motel. They had really fun vending machines in there, which I only saw as I was driving out. But if anyone stays there, let me know if you've ever got anything out of those vending machines because they look like fun. Um, the next day, I was going to drive to San Antonio, Texas, which, according to maps, which I'd taken various routes, left at different times, things like that, told me it was going to be about 12 hours, and this was based on leaving after work times, right? So after heavy traffic in the morning, all things like that. So I decided, because I am an early bird, that I was going to get up at 5 a.m. and use that initial 4 hours to get out of like the heavy traffic and move along to, you know, potentially outside, which seemed to work. So as I got in my car, it said it was going to be 12 hours. And I drove for, I'm still trying to work out how this happened basically, but I drove for approximately 6 hours, thinking like I've only got six to go, which is kind of easy. The first four at that time just flew by anyway, so it felt like I didn't even drive the first 4 hours. And when I glanced down at how much further I had to go, I still had 12 hours to go, even though I had just driven 6 hours. And I have no idea how or what happened or how that's even possible because I wasn't caught in traffic. Um, I don't know. I'm starting to believe that Texas is a treadmill and that we just drove in one spot continuously. Um, so just be aware of that. I don't really know how I can give you any advice on that because I don't know what happened. But yeah, ultimately getting to San Antonio, Texas ended up taking just under 16 hours. So we stayed there. Another thing I did with the Texas one, because I read and had heard multiple times that it was very busy, lots of traffic, things like that. I made sure that the hotel I picked was on the exit side of the direction I was moving in rather than the first place that I hit as soon as I came into um, Texas or San Antonio in this case. So I made sure that I was on the other end of it, making sure that I would hopefully avoid any traffic in the morning, which I did. And now by this point, because we'd already done the drive from LA to Arizona, I'd done 16 hours, or ended up being about 15, 16 hours from Arizona to Texas. And then I was up again early, 5, 6 a.m., ready to go to my next destination. All of these I had um, booked, so jumped in. The next one was going to Mobile, Alabama, or Mobile, Alabama. Not quite sure how to pronounce that. But because I was so used to at this point driving, I had initially, when I booked all of these, gave myself like lots of rest, which is fine. But then by this point, I just wanted to get to my destination. And so as I got a little bit closer to Mobile, I realized I had quite a few hours left in me. I wasn't tired. I had eaten. There was gas in my car. So I had booked everything as a cancelable reservation to allow for things like this. So I ended up cancelling my Mobile reservation and Mobile, Alabama reservation, and drove all the way through to a place called Crestview. Some people might know it. I didn't know where I was at the time, but I drove through to Crestview and stayed there, and that was really nice. And there was a Cracker Barrel there, so great for breakfast and the dog and everything. That was fantastic, and also just felt a little bit closer to Florida at that point. And then the next day drove down to Florida. So couple of things with that was the flexibility that I gave myself. There were much cheaper options in booking and pre-booking. If I'd prepaid non-cancelable rates, however, then I would have been stuck in a hotel for an entire day because I'd arrived there too early. Or for example, when I hit Florida, the apartment that I live in now wasn't ready. My lease wasn't going to kick in until about a week later. So I had booked an extended stay hotel, which oddly enough was next door to a hotel that I've stayed in multiple times in the past. Um, but we arrived. I picked the extended stay, of course, because I needed to work and I wanted to cook for myself. But to be very blunt, it was one of the worst hotels I've ever walked into. There were lots of people hanging around vehicles outside, including mine. It just made me feel quite vulnerable. The Wi-Fi didn't work. They didn't have any cutlery or cookware for the kitchen, so it just wasn't very good. And I forfeited. That one was cancelable minus 1 day or one night, so I did lose one night's money there, I guess, but honestly, it was worth it. I left, and I booked into another one, which was a Quality Inn down by quite a few shops and coffee bars and things like that. And that was a wonderful hotel, very flexible, easy to work from, clean, great for the dog. So, yeah, so I made that change. So, just one note there on your hotels if you are doing this journey, try to make sure that they're flexible because you never know what you're going to run into. And even if you're looking at pictures online and you're used to traveling and things like that, you can still be hit with a curveball. So, yeah, flexibility is key, I think. And I mentioned earlier I was going to jump around a little bit, so I'm going to go back to the products that I purchased and then how I utilized those on the journey. I had purchased a rooftop bag, and this was a bag, not a box, which gave me much more flexibility in the amount of space I could use because it wasn't like conforming to a particular shape. So that was really good. And it was, I don't know whether I should if I need to share this, but it was very aerodynamic. I was fearful that in the windy portions of my journey that it would throw me a little bit off kilter, but it didn't. It was wonderful, lots of space, so that was a huge thumbs up. The next thing I had was a way in which to transfer my dog's frozen poultry from A to B. He had turkey breasts for dinner every night, and I wanted to ensure that I could keep them fresh and frozen. So initially I had purchased a cooler that plugged into the 12-volt battery and then in the car, and then you could change it and plug it into the mains, and that was a great idea, and it worked great at home until I packed up my car and realized I didn't feel like it would be that safe to have something that obviously requires some form of airflow going through it in a car that was packed to the brim with items, including in my footwell. I had blankets and pillows and things like that down there, so I couldn't find a spot that felt, I wouldn't say safe, but they couldn't find a spot for it ultimately. Also, I needed to bring it in and out at every hotel stop, and that just wasn't easy, so I ended up sending that back. But it was a great product, so not everybody's in my position with blankets everywhere. So if you're looking for a cooler like that, definitely check it out. I'll link all these things down below in the description bar. But with that, I ended up switching to a cool box, just a regular cool box. It was an Igloo one. And I bought lots and lots and lots of ice packs, and ultimately, instead of plugging it in, I made sure that I didn't need access to this the entire journey, so it remained closed until we got to the hotel rooms. And then I also made sure that the hotels had freezer boxes or freezers within the rooms. That was something I checked for in reviews. Sometimes I had to call the hotel to double check, but as I arrived at the hotel, I would take the cool box in, take the meat out, I would refreeze, I would put everything into the freezer, refreezing the ice packs, and everything kind of maintained a very similar frozen point, I guess is the best way to describe it. And then I also used a quick defrosting tray for the pieces that I wanted to cook that evening and the next morning for him. So didn't have any issues keeping it frozen, and I was surprised. I thought that this was going to be one of my largest issues, trying to keep that fresh, but had absolutely no issue there, so that was a great one. And then also I travelled with a camping, I guess, or a travel stovetop. So this was something, it was just like a straight induction stovetop. I also purchased a small induction frying pan, and that just plugged into the hotels that didn't have kitchens. And that, again, two things that were good about that: it was extremely powerful, that I was surprised at. I had this vision of it taking me, 35 minutes to cook a little turkey breast, but it was as quick as the one I have at home. It was very easy, very thin, very easy. I threw that and the saucepan in my backpack with no issue, walked into hotel rooms, plugged it in, cooked dinner, and that also opened me up to being more flexible with the kind of hotel rooms that I could pick. Initially, I had to choose ones with kitchenettes in them. Now, because I had this travel stovetop cookware, I was able to choose. I had a much wider variety of hotels available to me, so that was really good, and ultimately a really nice success. And also, once I reached Florida and I was in the hotel I mentioned, I was also able to order from, your Publix online, things like that, get fresh vegetables, and with I was able to cook for myself in the room as well, and just eat a little bit healthier than your coffee shops and fast food and stuff, until I got into my own home. So that was a really great product that I added on there as well. And again, I'll link everything down below, so if anyone's interested, they can go and check them out. So that's it for this video. I do hope some of you found it helpful. If anyone has any questions, let me know down in the comments below. If anyone would like me to go into more details on any portion of this journey or anything that I might have missed, let me know. Happy to answer in the comments, or perhaps record a video if that seems more useful, or if it needs a little bit more context. Again, happy to do that. But until next time, guys, thank you for watching, and I appreciate having you here. Bye.